going on, everybody? It's Ruralwajo, and welcome back to another episode of Sleeper Sunday. Sleeper Sunday, for those of you that don't know, is a series I came up with showcasing fun hidden decks you may not know about that can deal quite a bit of damage in the proper hands. We'll be going over a basic deck list, strengths, weaknesses, what can be done to make the deck better, and of course a few replays to see the deck in action. In today's episode, we're going to be going over the winner of this month's poll, Speedroid. Speedroid is an archetype of wind machines used by Yugo in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 anime that had their first card release in the form of High Speedroid Kendama in Clash Rebellions in August of 2015, though they wouldn't get their actual first wave of support until their titular set High Speed Riders that October, and their most recent support was in Brothers of Legend at the end of 2021. They don't really quite have a real gimmick, their closest thing being like a bit of dice rolling from time to time due to being based on toys and such, but they mostly serve as a synchro spam focused deck, pumping as many bodies on board as possible to climb into your boss monsters. And they have a synchro-focused extra deck, of course, along with a singular link monster. Also, one more fun fact before we start, though, is that the Speedroid cards technically fall under the Roid naming convention, alongside cards like Truckroid, Stealthroid, Psychroid, etc. This doesn't really do anything. In fact, they actually encourage you to not play them together with the recent support for Roid. It just happens to be funny, kind of like how there's two different worm archetypes in the game, and so they have to specify reptile-type worm and stuff. I don't know, it's nothing huge, I just find it pretty funny. And so what better Speedroid to start off our list than the one everyone probably knows the most, that being Speedroid Terratop, who recently came to 2 and will likely go to 3 next list, so huge W for Speedroid players. Now Terratop of course lets you special it from your hand if you control no monsters, and on summon will search for a Speedroid monster from your deck. And this has always been used historically to make really powerful rank 3s, or even in some situations link 2 plays such as Cherubini, but in this deck in particular it is actually really strong, who would have guessed, because not only can you search Takatomborg, who's infamous for breaking up a lot of hands as a soft garnet, but also cards like Marble Machine, Ultra Hound, and other really strong Speedroid monsters that you can normal summon, given that you specialty Terratop for free. It's easily the best starter card in the whole deck for these reasons, and we want to max out as many copies as we physically are allowed to. Speaking of Takatomborg, of course we are playing 3. Probably pretty weird to see 3 Takatomborg in any deck, considering that you barely want to play the 1 just so you can search it in everything else, but Takatomborg is a really strong card because it's a free inherent special summon extender in this deck that you actually can use the second effect for in this deck, because you can special any of your really strong Speedroid tuners such as Den Daiko Duke and Fukimadoshi Piper. You just gotta watch out though, because it says you can only special summon it once per turn, but the effect of Tribute isn't a hard once per turn, so you can kind of cheese this by using your normal summon on it and then using a special summon to bring it back, and then tributing it a second time. Speedroid Marble Machine is a pendulum. They actually have quite a few of those because it's an Arc 5 archetype, go figure. The pendulum effect literally does not matter, literally ever, but on normal summon, it allows you to add a Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except wind monsters. So even ignoring the really good Stratus effect, this will notice a really common pattern in that they lock you into winds. This will lock you into special summoning winds, and then you have a lot of them that will make you only able to activate wind monster effects. There's a lot of different things that lock you into wind-based things in this archetype, which is basically one of the downfalls, which we'll talk about in the weaknesses category, but it on the other hand allows you to clash it with other wind archetypes, which I think is pretty cool. Ultra Hound on normal summon lets you send a Speedroid card from your deck to the graveyard, simple enough, but during your main phase, except the turn it was sent to grave, you can banish it and target a Speedroid in your grave, shuffle it into the deck, and if you do, special a Speedroid synchro monster from your extra deck with the same level but a different name, but negate its effects. So the first effect is pretty standard. I mean, you can normal summon it off of either your regular normal summon or your link monster, which we'll get into, and you'll mostly be sending cards either like Den Daiko Duke for its graveyard effect, or Duplicate for the same reason. The second effect seems pretty niche, but it actually works out really well with cards like High Speedroid Hagoita and Chanbara. If you go into a Chanbara, you can then summon a Hagoita, or vice versa, which is really good because Hagoita has a really solid graveyard effect. Den Daiko Duke is the first tuner we'll be covering. It's the level 3 that says you can banish from your grave, do special a Speedroid tuner from your hand or grave except Daiko Duke. Very simple effect, but incredibly strong, because you can use this for a synchro summon and then use it to get another body on board for a synchro summon, which is great again in combination with cards like Fukimadoshi Piper or even Red-Eye Dice, which I should have specified off Takatomborg as well, because it is one of the main things you will be going for. You have plenty of ways to put Daiko Duke in grave as well, even if you're not synchro summoning with him, and so he is a really powerful card. Speedroid Car Turbo is also a tuner level 3 that says if you control a wind, you can special lift from hand. This is an activated effect, and this is the one that locks you from using monster effects except for winds. Also, you can banish it from Grave and Speedroid as well to make all winds you control gain 800 attack until the end of the turn. It doesn't come up all the time, but it can help you beat over problematic monsters and even sometimes go for an OTK, so that's pretty neat, though it is easily one of the weakest, if not the weakest, of the graveyard effects in this deck. Speedroid Double Yo-Yo is another classic for those that played the deck when it first came out. It says on normal summon you can target a level 3 or lower Speedroid in Grave and special summon it. You don't always get Double Yo-Yo, you try to with some of your combos, but a lot of the time it just kind of ends up not really doing anything. But it is really solid if you do have your normal summon off of your Link monster, or even in certain situations where you're doing a comeback with Terror Top, special Terror Top, add Double Yo-Yo, normal lit, special one that you had in Grave. Pretty solid. And then we also have Fukimadoshi Piper. It is a level 4 tuner that says on summon you can excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of other wind monsters you control, and add an excavated card to your hand and place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Also, you can banish it from Grave to target a 3 or higher wind you control and reduce its level by 2. So Fukimadoshi Piper is a really strong card because the first effect to keep in mind doesn't have any real restriction on it. It doesn't say like add a Speedroid or a wind monster or something. This is literally just a pot of prosperity for up to the number of other winds you control, which can easily hit 3+. So you can grab any card from a hand trap to talents or thrust to even called by, which is really cool. The graveyard effect doesn't come up super often for me, probably because I'm just really bad at the deck and I haven't like fully explored all the lengths you can go with it. Though I do kind of wish it said reduce its level by up to 2 and not just exactly 2. It'd give you a little bit more flexibility, but you can't have everything. Alongside Double Yo-Yo, we have Red-Eyed Dice as another one of the classics that says on summon you can target a Speedroid you control except Red-Eyed Dice and make it level 1 to 6. Really great for getting the exact synchro plays that you want. Also note that it's not a hard once per turn, which is really cool because you're easily going to be summoning this up to twice in a lot of your combos if you're utilizing it to get the perfect synchro plays, which I think is really cool. That's actually it for the Speedroid monsters. We're playing a more conservative build of the deck. There are quite a few variants you can play. For the non-Speedroid monsters, we're playing like Castra Unicorn here. There are Castra builds of Speedroid, but even just the Unicorn on its own is really good because we are playing the one Birth alongside it. So you can either use Unicorn as an end board piece to rip a card from the extra deck, which is really cool, but more importantly, you can go for Unicorn, search for Birth, and then use the Unicorn as synchro fodder because level 7 is a really great level for synchros in this deck due to cards like Baron. But then you can use the Birth to special the Unicorn back to either use for another synchro material or again to keep it on end board for its effect, which is awesome. Moving on to the back row, we have 3 Speedroid Wheel. There's a quick play that says discard 1 card and roll a 6-sided die, and then special summon from your hand and or deck 1 or 2 Speedroid monsters whose total levels equal the result but negate their effects. Also, if you don't summon, you lose life points equal to the result times 500, basically if you roll a number that you don't have any of that level in your deck. Wheel is an amazing starter and extender because it can get a lot of plays going, even if you don't really hit super optimal targets. For example, you can hit like a Marble Machine and like a Car Turbo, which doesn't really do too much, but you could end up hitting things like a Fukimadoshi Piper or a Den Daiko Duke, and then other cards that would do really awesome in the graveyard. Really great there. But like I said, even if you get like bad rolls, quote unquote, you can still have those engraved for later and then just use them for a free synchro play, especially when extending through hand traps. Speed Recovery is a non-once per turn monster reborn for Speedroid monsters, but it also has a really good graveyard effect that says during your main phase, except the turn it was sent to grave, you can banish it from grave and target a Speedroid in your grave to add to hand. I'm not sure if it's one of the replays that I'm going to be showing. I might have saved it, I might have not. But on stream, when I was playing against one of our friends, Fruit YGO, we actually opened 2 Speed Recovery and drew the 3rd for turn, which made us not really able to do very much that turn, but I didn't die, meaning that I was able to use the Speed Recoveries to just keep getting resources back through multiple disruptions. And so having 3 Speed Recoveries, because it's not a hard once per turn for either effect, was really funny. And it actually helped me end up winning the game. Not too much else to say other than I think the artwork looks a lot like a shoe. I don't know why. The final Speedroid card is Speedroid Duplicate. It is a normal trap that says banish a wind from your grave and target 1 card your opponent controls, return it to the hand. And during your main phase, if it's in your grave, you can target a 2 or higher Speedroid you control, reduce its level by 1, and if you do special summon this card as a normal monster, it is a machine tuner wind level 1 with 0 attack and defense, and not treated as a trap. But you can only use this effect of Duplicate once per duel. So Duplicate's a really strong card because it has 2 really great effects no matter where the card actually is located. on the field, which is not really going to always be unless you hard open it or have insane gas insertion off of Cork Shooter, or even get it off Fukimoshi Piper, I suppose. It's a really good disruption on top of your end board, which is usually not the strongest, so this on top of that will be really, really great, and it actually helped me survive a turn against a deck on stream. But the Graveyard effect is probably the most common reason you'll be using it, because you can dump it off of your Ultra Hound, which is great. So you can use it as a free body to go into things like your Cork Shooter, or to climb into other synchro plays. As I mentioned, we're playing a fairly conservative build of Speedroid, so we have a lot of non-engine room, being 3 Ash, 3 Droll, 3 Imperm, 2 Talents, and a Thrust, on top of 1 Called By. There's a total of 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 non-engine pieces, which is awesome, because that means that even if our end board is a little bit on the weaker side because we got disrupted or we didn't open optimally, we can usually still stop our opponent, and going second isn't the hardest. That's it for the main deck. Onto the extra, we have 2 of their Link monster being High Speedroid Rubber Band Shooter. It says during your main phase you can immediately normal summon a wind monster, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except synchro monsters. Also, you can banish a wind synchro from your extra deck, reveal 2 Speedroids with different names from your deck whose total levels equal that monster's level, and your opponent randomly picks one for you to add to hand and send the other to the graveyard. These are both hard once per turn effects. Rubber Band Shooter is insanely strong, so strong that people will literally shotgun disruptions on this card before you even attempt to use one of the effects, which is pretty funny because it's not a non-summon effect. The combination of an additional normal summon and an archetype with quite a few really strong normal summons like Ultra Hound and Double Yo-Yo is really great, on top of also getting the free body on board and the free Foolish Burial, and most of the cards in this deck are either really good to summon back from grave or have a really powerful graveyard effect, meaning that really no matter which one you get, you're usually going to get some really great value, which is great because some of the combos, you'd think they want you to specifically get one of the cards, but a lot of the time, such as Ultra Hound and Daiko Duke in one of the combos, I believe it is, you can actually get value no matter which one you get in hand, which is awesome. The only bad thing about this card is that it locks you specifically into synchros, not just wins, meaning that going into Appaloosa here isn't super viable. In fact, I don't think I've ever actually made Appaloosa except maybe once when I bricked, so it is a little unfortunate there because an Appaloosa on top of every end board would be awesome. But unfortunately, again, as I said, you can't really have everything. Martial Metal Marcher, I don't really think I ever go into very often, but it's just a free level 3 tuner that you can use to summon back a tuner, which you usually don't need because you usually have way too many tuners, but it's not really bad at all. The first Speedroid synchro we're going to be talking about is High Speedroid Cork Shooter. This card came out of Synchro Storm, I believe, and it is a powerful one. It is a level 3 tuner synchro monster that says on synchro summon you can activate one of these effects. Either add a Speedroid spell or trap from your deck to your hand, or if all materials that were used for the synchro summon of this card were Speedroid monsters and are all engraved, special summon all of them. So both of these effects are very, very strong. Typically though, you will be going for the second effect because, I mean, it's a free extender, especially on top of a lot of these effects not being a hard once per turn, such as Red Eye Dice, which is awesome. You can usually use cards like Terror Top and then use that to get Takatomborg, summon Red Eye Dice. Well, actually go Terror Top, go into Marble Machine, add Takatomborg into Red Eye Dice makes something level 2, go into Cork Shooter, summon them back, Red Eye Dice effect again. You know what I'm going for here. Though the first effect can be pretty cool to search for cards like Duplicate or even Speedroid Wheel if you really need it as an extender. Unfortunately not Speed Recovery though, because it's not a Speedroid card, which is weird. High Speedroid Higuita says during either player's turn you contribute this card to increase the levels of all monsters currently on the field by 1 until the end of the turn. Never gonna come up, so just completely ignore that effect. But if it's in your grave and you control a Speedroid tuner monster, you can special it from your grave. Also, you cannot special it for the rest of the turn except wins, hard ones per turn, yada yada. Really, really great extender here because you can put it in grave after using it for a synchro summon, or I guess for its first effect, and then special summon it back, which is a free big 2000 body that you can also use to climb into more synchro plays, which is awesome. Especially huge for going into cards like Crystal Wing. Chambara is another classic synchro monster, generic synchro 5 that says it can attack twice during each battle phase. At the start of the damage step if it battles against 200 attack, and if it's sent to grave, you can target one of your banished Speedroid cards and add it to your hand. So Chambara actually has a lot of uses, not just in Speedroid, but as a whole as a synchro monster. Really good for helping push for OTKs, especially in decks like Alien, for example, that really like making level 5 synchros. But of course, if it's sent to grave, being able to add a banished Speedroid back to hand is really great, especially for cards like Daiko Duke or Ultra Hound or any of the other Speedroids you would otherwise be banishing for its effect, which is awesome. We're also playing Charge Warrior for a generic level 6 wind synchro target. It does draw a card, doesn't always come up though, and I typically end up banishing it off of the Rubber Band Shooter. Clearing Fast Dragon has a pendulum effect that I don't really think ever comes up, so I won't mention it, but it's basically a quick effect Imperm that also changes the attack to 0 for monster special summon from the extra deck, which is pretty cool. but also if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, you place in your Pendulum Zone, which I guess the effect would come up then. I don't typically make this card all the time unless I end up bricking, because it's not really great if your opponent already has the resources to go into an extra deck monster you'd want to negate with this, so you're probably going to end up losing anyway, but it's not the worst thing in the world. We also are playing Wind Pegasus adding Nistar. You can make it and pop a spell or trap, which is pretty cool. And then of course the graveyard effect is solid as well, though a lot of the time this is a target you can banish for your rubber band shooter if you want to go for a 4 and a 3. Again, we are playing Crystal Wing, of course. This is basically the archetype it was made for, and also we are playing 2 because you can end up making 2, especially in the grind. High Speedroid Kite Drake. Ooh, I love this card. It's a level 8 synchro that requires a Wind Machine tuner and one or more non-tuners that says on synchro summon you can either negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent currently controls or destroy all other cards on the field. Basically, it's just a walking nuke no matter what effect you choose with 3000 attack nonetheless. And then also if it's sent to the grave by your opponent, you can add a Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand. So it's an extender even if your opponent negates it and destroys it, or gets rid of it by other means that puts it in the graveyard. But mainly just the first 2 effects are insane, especially the board nuke. Just really helps the deck going second, especially because it can struggle otherwise. Shen Shen is a shockingly strong target you can go into. It is a wind and a walking field macrocosmos, which is awesome. But I actually really like its punching effect because you can return banished monsters to the graveyard, such as your Daiko Duke on swing, and I really like that. And you can even summon it back with its graveyard effect by banishing things like Speedroids and your hand traps like Ash Blossom, which is awesome. And finally, we have Baron de Fleur because it's probably the best thing to come out of Synchro Storm, other than, you know, the Lyralist, of course. And probably the best support card they got out of Synchro Storm. So that's going to do it for the main and extra deck. Moving on to the cards that you could play but don't, or can just have been played and just aren't anymore. Speedroid has so many cards, I had to separate it into 2 lists. And most of this was just for Speedroid cards, not even alternative cards. Because holy shit, this archetype is pack filler. Think of Perform Pal, like everything Perform Pal got out of Arc 5, and the fact that only like a 10th of those cards are actually playable and have ever been relevant. That's basically the same with Speedroid, because a lot of archetypes from that era got the same treatment. Melodious, Raid Raptor, even Fluffle, like a lot of Arc 5 decks just got so much garbage pack filler. So I'm not even going to cover most of these. I'm just going to go in a line and say which one's pack filler and which ones can be played but just aren't anymore. So let's go. Skull Marbles, pack filler, pack filler, pack filler, pack filler, pack filler. This card's actually not bad on summon it, or normal summon, sorry. You special level 4 or lower Speedroid from hand, and during your main phase you can banish it from grave to send a win from deck to grave. Basically it just got power crept by a lot of other Speedroid cards. Pack filler, pack filler, pack filler, pack filler. This card isn't horrible, it's just you don't want to immediately have to synchro summon with it. Pack filler, slow. I don't even want to read this card, I just know it's horrible and I have a million of them. Malicious Magnet is really funny, not gonna lie. It lets you synchro with your opponent's monster, but it's still not that great. And finally onto a card that's actually not bad. So this card is a High Speedroid Clearwing Rider, which a lot of Speedroid players, I know quite a few of them actually do like this card, and some of them do play it. But it is a level 11 synchro that requires a Wind Tuner, one non-tuner, Wind Synchro, sorry. Once per turn during your main phase, you can roll a 6-sided die and shuffle wind monsters from your graveyard into your deck up to the result. Then you can destroy cards your opponent controls up to the number shuffled, and if you do, this card gains 500 attack for each card destroyed by this effect until the end of this turn. And during your opponent's main phase quick effect, you contribute the Synchro Summon card to special up to 2 level 7 Wind Synchros with different names from each other from your extra deck. I'm gonna be honest, this card isn't bad at all. It's got 2 pretty solid effects. The main thing it's bogged down by is its level being a little bit awkward, because usually you're better off like summoning even numbers, not odd numbers, other than like level 7. The fact that the destruction is chance based, which it does fit in with like the theme of the archetype, but it does end up bogging the card down, because like you can pop up to 6 cards and then shuffle back 6 things and then deal 7,000 damage with just the Clearwing Rider and attack per game with another monster. Or you can pop 1 card, gain a little bit of attack and advantage, and still be sitting there with just a body that can punch something, but your opponent still has way more advantage than you. And finally, the opponent's main phase effect does seem really insane, not gonna lie, for certain situations, but it's mainly that there's not really many amazing level 7 Wind Synchros, though only one you'd be like summoning is Clearwing Fast Dragon, because you're not playing the original Clearwing Synchro Dragon, because I mean Wind Pegasus isn't really gonna do anything because not on summon. If it was on summon it'd be a different story, not gonna lie. I don't think this card's bad at all, I just feel like there are better options to play, though it is up to personal preference in my opinion. Moving on to the other Speedroid list, holy shit. We have High Speedroid Kendama. This was their first one. It does piercing. You can banish a machine from grave to burn for 500. If it's in your grave and you control no cards, period, you can special it, but you can't normal summon or set the turn you activate this effect. Very slow, very clunky, doesn't really do anything for Speedroid themselves. Really bad restrictions, just kind of a bad card overall. High Speedroid Puzzle can go up to 2600 attack if it battles a special summon monster, and during the end phase, if it was in the grave because it was synchro summoned and sent there this turn from the field, you can add a Speedroid monster from grave to hand. Basically pack filler. High Speedroid re-level is pack filler, banishes a Speedroid from grave, targets a synchro, and changes his level and gains attack. Stupid, not gonna lie. Shock Surprise isn't actually bad. It banishes up to 2 Speedroids from grave to pop that many cards on the field. Like I said, not horrible at all. Most of your synchros can do kind of like it, but better though. And it's not searchable, which is the big thing. Like if it was searchable by something, it probably wouldn't be horrible. Like a 1-of of this wouldn't be bad at all. Speedroid Scratch is actually their newest card out of Brothers of Legend, and this card isn't bad, like literally at all. You send a Speedroid card from hand to grave to add a Speedroid from deck to hand. There's 2 reasons you don't really want to play this. One, because it makes you even more susceptible to Droll than you already are, and this deck just fucking despises Droll more than most other decks. But also the fact that it requires you to send specifically a Speedroid card. Well, the fact that it sends and it has to be a Speedroid. The send part, because it not saying discard means you can get shifted and not be able to use this card, but also the fact that it has to be a Speedroid card. If it just said discard 1 card, add a Speedroid from deck to hand, easily this card would be a 3-of. This card's amazing, but it does have a little bit too much restriction, honestly. You can absolutely play it, especially if you're playing a more gas build of Speedroid, not the more conservative non-engine build that I'm playing and that I found. Speaking of which, I will leave the list that I got inspired from, or basically I got the base from, I should say, in the description below, like I usually do when I copy lists. But overall, I personally would not play in a build such as this one. Speed Lift says if you control exactly 1 tuner and no other monsters, summon a 4 or lower Speedroid from deck, and neither player can activate cards or effects on that summon. A bit too clunky and specific. Re-Die Cycle, it's a monster reborn that changes level and banishes to immediately synchro when synchro. Not like insanely bad, but there's just so many better things you can play. You'd rather search a duplicate. And then Dice Roll Battle, basically the TLDR other than the sick-ass Beyblade art. Do you know the card Fusion Fright Waltz for Fluffle that like requires your opponent to specifically be on like a fusion deck for it to do literally anything? That's basically this card. I'm not even gonna bother reading it. Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon, you know, the card that got the Ghost Rare that ended up being like really cheap out of Synchro Storm when they brought Ghost Rares back, is basically a spell and trap, negate and destroy. Makes it unaffected by activated monster effects if your opponent uses a monster effect and gains attack. And then also, if it's sent to grave by opponent's card, add a win from deck to hand. It's basically Baron, but like not as good. Like there's just no real reason to play this over Baron, sorry. Moving on to an engine that actually used to see a lot of play with Speedroids. That is the Wind Witch engine. Remember when this engine was like literally everywhere back in like 2017, I think it was, like just after Link Monsters or something, or just before Link Monsters? This engine was really cool. But Wind Witch Ice Spell, if you control no monsters, special from hand, then you can special Wind Witch from deck, cannot be tributed. Also on summon it, it burns 500 to your opponent, which is pretty cool for time. The main issue is that it also locks you into 5 or higher wind monsters. Basically meaning you can't go into your Link monster, while your Link monster is basically the most important thing in your entire deck. This is really unfortunate because basically Ice Spell goes into Glass Spell adds Snowbell, and then Snowbell specials itself, which is basically an indestructible Crystal Wing off of 1 card before you even do any other Speedroid plays. Like honestly, if it didn't have this restriction, it would make it worth it even though it conflicts with Terror Top. But it's just the fact that it prevents you from accessing Rubber Band Shooter that just really makes it unfortunate to like not be able to play consistently. It's a very strong engine overall, but just doesn't really work anymore in modern Speedroid, at least to my knowledge. And then finally, we don't really have the space for it, but Win and SP would be decent options. Win can special summon like Win monsters in the opponent's grave, of course, being cards like Baron, Defleur, and Castra Unicorn, which is cool. And SP, we can't really play it too reliably because, again, we are locked into wins all the time, so it wouldn't be doing anything amazing most of the time. But with all that being said, whew, I am out of breath. That is the main extra and all the alternative cards. While I take a minute to get a drink and take a breather, you guys can go ahead and check out the replays I got with this deck that I got on stream, showing off just how strong this deck can be, even if you're completely incompetent with it like I am. With that being said, I'll see you after the replays. Alright, and that's going to do it for the Speedroid replays I gathered, or just a handful of them at least. Also, as a reminder, of course, that I did get all of these replays on stream alongside chat, so if you want to see my live commentary as I went through each turn and each play, you can check it out in the annotation in the top right as always. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the strengths and weaknesses. Starting off with these strengths, of course, lots of gas makes you able to play through multiple disruptions really easily usually. You have plenty of starters as well as extenders that make single-use hand traps such as Ash or Imperm not really effective as opposed to power cards such as Droll, Shifter, etc. This also gives you a ton of variety in your end boards, so it'd be pretty hard for your opponents to prepare for what you'll make when there's dozens to dozens of combos that this deck can pull off. Cards like Speed Recovery, Daiko Duke, and Ultra Hound can give you solid follow-up and recovery plays after turn 1, which is great to get you back in the game if your board is broken, as you could see in those replays. Outside of the Wind Lock, they are fairly generic in what you can make, meaning that as long as we get more wind pieces to end on in the future, like Baron, they'll have a variety of different options to go into. Finally, multiple variants between a more Castro-focused build, straight gas build like I mentioned with Speedroid Scratch, or a more conservative non-engine build like shown here, gives you plenty of options to experiment with that could also throw opponents off as well. Of course, we can't have strengths without weaknesses though, with of course the biggest problem being the Wind Lock. Despite certain decks getting really solid support like Lyrilusk, Wind happens to be like the weakest attribute, even more so than Fire now, of course, after the Year of Fire has transpired. This makes the end board incredibly restrictive, of course, but also makes the archetype incredibly xenophobic outside of like exactly Wind Witch. And despite the sheer amount of gas, the end boards in the deck aren't amazing. You typically end on like 2 to 3 disruptions tops out of like combos alone, due to the mixtures of locks in the deck between Wind and Synchro. If they don't hand trap you, most decks are going to be able to play through your board unless you also have hand traps as well. Finally, I've noticed a common theme with this deck is having too many good tuners and not enough good non-tuners. It reminds me a lot of Virtual World in that unless you perform the lines perfectly, you can end up with a bunch of tuners on board and literally nothing to do with them, but it's even worse in this deck than Virtual World because you can only Synchro Summon. So with all that being said, how are we making Speedroid better? Well, the first option of course would be to give Wind as an archetype, or as an attribute, sorry I should say, just better support overall. There isn't so much of a problem of Speedroid exactly, but just Wind as a whole. This can be fixed by having more archetypes you could splash with Speedroid, and of course more generic end pieces, again like Baron. More non-tuner extenders specifically for Speedroid though would also be really cool. Taka Tomborg is insane, and Unicorn is pretty cool as well, but outside of that, basically every other non-tuner, Terror Top, Marble Machine, Ultra Hound, and Double Yo-Yo, are starter cards. Like, all these cards require either no monsters or only work on normal summon, think about that. So just one more Speedroid card that can special itself from hand, or even Graveyard, would be really awesome. I'm not sure what kind of effect I'd give it though, so let me know your thoughts in the comments. Finally, I'd like to see one more good going second option for the deck. Kite Drake can only carry the weight on his shoulders so much before his spine snaps, and cards like Chanbara are cool for dealing damage, but not quite for breaking boards. So while it would make the extra deck kinda tight, it would be really cool to get like maybe a level 7 Wind Synchro that can help break boards by shuffling or banishing cards back into the deck. But with that out of the way, I'm not sure how much more I can say about Speedroid. This is easily one of the strongest decks we've actually covered on the series, probably like very thinly crossing that line on Sleeper. I'm pretty sure most people know this deck exists because the Speedroid community is very vocal about how much they love their deck. I made this comparison on Twitter, but essentially if any of you play Overwatch, Speedroid players are the Lucio players of Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you know what you know, like, that's all I can really say. Like, I think we just keep progressing slowly past the line of Sleeper and more just generic rogue tier in general, but I don't really think you guys mind that much at all. But again, with that being said, I think that's gonna do it for the video. If you liked it, please be sure to leave a like, as I'll put this video and the channel into YouTube recommended, and if the content were more like the rest of my Sleeper Sunday series, then of course consider subscribing and turning on notifications, because support the channel or anything else, and it's absolutely free, and we're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. On the topic of Sleeper Sunday, remember that I always have a community tab poll going up around the beginning of every month, or maybe even the end of the month before, where I will put up a poll asking which deck you guys would like to see for the next Sleeper Sunday out of 4 options. If you want to suggest these options in the poll, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below. For $5 a month, you get access to a bunch of different awesome perks, such as early video access, access to all my PNGs, and Patreon exclusive posts, but you also get to vote for which decks go in the Sleeper Sunday polls. Also, if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome TCG merchandise in the process, check out Tapio cards in the link down below. Use code AURORA5 for 5% off your purchase at checkout, and to support me financially. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.